We're so pleased to have everybody here for this lunch and learn on the Community Economic Resilience Fund, or CERF, as it is known. My name is Evan Schmidt. I'm the CEO of Valley Vision. Valley Vision is a nonprofit civic leadership organization in the Sacramento region. We create livable communities across the region by advancing economic prosperity, social equity, and environmental sustainability. Really happy to be hosting this lunch today, and you're tuning in for our hour-and-a-half session on the Community Economic Resilience Fund. Before jumping into our program, I want to also thank our co-hosting partners, including the Hub, Building Healthy Communities, Sacramento ACT, Sierra Business Council, Sierra Health Foundation, the Tahoe Prosperity Center, California Forward, and the Prosperity Partnership, including the Sacramento Asian Chamber, the Metro Chamber, SACOG, and the Greater Sacramento Economic Council. Thank you to all our hosts, and thanks to you all for spending the time with us today. Before we get into our program, let's do a little bit of housekeeping. First of all, a lot of you are already starting to introduce yourselves, so please keep that coming. Introduce yourselves in the chat. Tell us your name, your affiliation, where you're tuning in from, and your comments and questions as we go through the session. Please feel free to utilize that chat, and we'll try to get to all the questions we can. Second, you may have noticed this is a relatively large meeting, so we're going to ask that everybody stay muted. Please reserve your questions for the time that we have reserved for question and answer. And when you do have a question, you can use the raise hand function so that we can see that you have something you'd like to say. You can also at any time enter your questions into the chat, and we'll do our best to get to everything. It's possible with this large meeting and the limited time we have that we won't get to all the questions. If that's the case, we're going to do our best to follow up with everything. And this meeting is being recorded, and we will circulate both the recording and the slide deck at the conclusion or after the meeting. So that's a little bit of housekeeping. I see introductions are still coming in. Thank you for that. And let's go ahead and go to the first slide. Or to the next slide. This is the first slide. All right, thank you. So the topic of our meeting today is the Community Economic Resilience Fund, but I wanted to start by just setting a little bit of high-level context before we really get into the heart of what that means. So what is CERF? CERF, it's a state program. It's one-time state funding that's going to distribute $600 million to regions across California to support inclusive and low-carbon economic development. And more than a program, what I really want to express is it's a real opportunity. I think that this CERF program is a transformational opportunity for our region to build a collective vision for how we want to grow and thrive. And it also, and this can be unique, it holds the opportunity to fund some of the priorities that we identify. So it's both a vision setting process, and it's also an implementation phase where we'll have the opportunity to really advance some key strategies. So that's very exciting. The other thing that's very exciting about it is that it's inviting a very equity-centered and inclusive process. So it's giving us the time and resources to really be able to build that very collective vision that reflects the diverse views and diverse communities of our region. Let's go to the next slide and talk a little bit about what our goals are and what we're going to be doing over the next hour and a half. So we want to provide an overview and an update about the CERF program. We're going to have a panel where we hear from regional leaders about how the CERF program is going to impact communities. And we want to provide a forum for community members and you all to voice your excitement, your thoughts about opportunities, your concerns for the program as well. And we're going to have breakout sessions at the end to be able to do that. And finally, and this is not a bullet, but I hope that by the end of this session, you will join me in a sense of excitement about what the CERF program offers for us and what we might be able to do with it as a region. And let's go to the next slide, please. I'll tell you just a little bit more about Valley Vision and why we're leading this webinar today. So I already talked about our triple bottom line approach. That's the always looking co-equally at the economy, the equity and community, and the environment. So that's really how we move our work forward, focusing on livability of our communities. We're really known as a regional convener, so bringing communities together, especially diverse stakeholder-based communities together to tackle our region's challenges. And we're also known for actionable research, so making sure that we're creating a data platform on which to build coalitions and build a sense of action. And our role in this. So Valley Vision is pursuing the role of the regional convener, and you're going to learn more about what that means in CERF language. But ultimately, we're planning on submitting an application on behalf of the region, and we're inviting you all and others to work with us on that. So this is a large umbrella collaborative effort. It's about building a collective vision, and we are hoping to bring together an application that facilitates that collective vision on behalf of the region. And let's go to the next slide. All right, so next we're going to do a CERF 101 session where we really are going to share the basics of the program with you and help familiarize you with what this program is and what are the opportunities that it holds. And for this first portion, we're going to bring in our partners from California Forward. California Forward is a statewide organization that makes sure government and the economy work for everyone through a collaborative, inclusive, and regional approach to solutions with accountability. They've been a partner to us. They've also been instrumental in helping shape and bring the CERF opportunity about statewide. And they've been providing technical assistance and helping support listening sessions like these all over the state. So I'm going to turn it over to my good friend Ish Herrera, who's the Director of Regional Stewardship for California Forward, to take you through a few slides about this statewide program of CERF and kind of do the CERF 101 session. So Ish, I'm going to turn to you.
Great, thank you so much, Evan. Very kind of you, and great setting the table here for these next few slides. Let's jump into just some of the high-level key points of this program. As Evan mentioned, this is an opportunity that is greatly aligned with a lot of the work that's going on in your region. There's tremendous focus on things like equitable and sustainable economic development that many of you are involved with. There's priorities around equity, job quality, making sure that good paying jobs are available to as many people in your region as possible. There's the expectation that a one-time state resource be leveraged with additional public dollars to the federal, state, local government levels, and also that you consider what philanthropy and other private investors might be able to do to support this effort. There's two phases to the program. Let's go to the next slide. We are discussing here today, how we're getting the ball rolling on phase one. And what we do know is that there are 13 regions that the state has designated across the regions to fund up to $5 million each. In each of those regions, we know that there will only be one application funded per region. And really, what we are encouraging is for you all to support the efforts there in your region around collaboration, around setting a table that's cross-sectoral, that includes priorities that are collectively identified and elevated, and have the input of as many stakeholders in your region as possible. And ultimately, this process will yield an economic development plan for the region that takes into account some of the existing work that has been underway as well. And we'll talk about that in a few more slides. But the second phase that will become available later this year, as we get closer to fall, will be phase two, and that's the implementation phase, where the state anticipates making a competitive source of funds available for all regions in the state to access through a $500 million pot of resources. There you'll have the opportunity to take priorities that surface in your region's plans and have them compete for state dollars that will be available to you. And you see there on the right what the different emphasis areas are for those sources of funding. Let's go to the next slide. This is the way that the state has divided the state of California for the purposes of this program. You'll see that your region is right there in between the Northern San Joaquin, Eastern Sierra, and the North State. It's a region that many of you represent. Some of you may have overlapping boundaries into some of these other CERF regions. We certainly encourage you to get involved in those CERF processes in those other neighboring regions, if applicable. But they're really meant to bring, again, partners from across the county boundaries, across sectors, from different roles in the community, whether you're a community-based organization, whether you're a government entity or a business entity. We really are encouraging you all to connect to Valley Vision and get involved in the High Road Transition Collaborative table that they're setting. And there you're going to see hyperlinks in these slides that are being referenced at the bottom. We strongly encourage you to visit those to stay up to date on the latest developments from the state on this program and other offerings that are being made available. So we encourage you to visit those websites periodically. Next slide. And so here are some of the things that the state hopes will come about through the work that you all are embarking on under phase 1 of the Community Economic Resiliency Fund. Obviously, I think this event today is aligned with the goal of setting an inclusive table that centers equity by encouraging all of you to contribute with the priorities that each of you represents based on what you hear from your stakeholders and your constituents. You're encouraged to bring those things to the table. But these are meant to be strong, sustainable partnerships amongst you all that go beyond this one-time program and really take your region into the future and take this framework of inclusivity and equitable development into the future with programs that may come after CERF, either to the public or private sector. So while CERF is the focus right now, think of this in a more long-term where it's the framework of doing this work together that is really what we want to see folks take into the future for other opportunities. There's a series of things that have to happen in the regional plans that your effort will yield as well. There's several analyses that have to be conducted and led by the convening organization around the state of the economy in your region, the sectors, the equitableness of the region's ability to have, recovered from the COVID-19 pandemic, the sustainable nature of existing jobs, the prospect of future jobs that provide the opportunity for higher incomes of residents in the Sacramento region, and a slew of other things that have to be led by the convener. But ultimately, these strategies have to have these investments elevated that will yield economic recovery and help your region move into an era where there are the propensity of jobs with good paying incomes is more widespread, and that those employment opportunities are also keeping in mind the ongoing climate impacts that we're seeing here in California. And the last thing I'll share is the current timeline that we have from the state. I will preface that this timeline, as well as my comments here today, are still based on draft guidelines that the state currently has available. We are anticipating that the week of the 23rd, the state will release the official final guidelines for this program that each convening organization in each region will need to use along with their partners to begin putting together the proposal in response to those guidelines. So while this is still, the final details are TBD, we do anticipate that the final guidelines will reflect a similar timeline to what you're seeing here on the screen. And so you can see that the turnaround is fairly quickly for this work, with awards being announced in early July and work commencing in October with the contractual pieces that the convener is responsible for, and the actual planning with all of you begins in the fall as well. So the turnaround is quick. That this is not anything that has to do with Valley Vision or California Forward. This is just the timeline that the state has given all the regions, and so we're all working within those parameters. And so I think being here today is a really good step to stay engaged with Valley Vision and to begin engaging, if you haven't already, this process and learning about it and finding a way to contribute to it. And so really, really great to see so many of you here today, anticipating your participation and hoping that you stay connected. With that, I think I am going to turn it over to my colleague, Isa, who's going to walk you through some of the work that I mentioned earlier, the efforts that are already underway that this process will take into account and do so in a sub-regional way. Isa?
Thank you so much, Ish, and hi, everybody. It's really good to be here with all of you. My name is Isa Avancenia. I am the Manager of Research and Policy for Valley Vision. And what I'm going to be talking about, Ish just gave us that really great overview of sort of the basics of the CERF program based on the draft guidelines that just came out. And what I'm going to be talking about is an overview of some of the efforts happening now in our Sacramento region to prepare ourselves for this CERF program. And I want to start by really just highlighting a couple of assets that we have in our Sacramento region that will help put us in a really good position to be able to compete for these funds and also make sure that these funds are leveraged in a really effective way with long-lasting impacts for our region. So first thing I want to talk about here is our regional and sub-regional economic plans. So the state has noted multiple times that through the draft guidelines and other avenues that the regional and sub-economic plans that exist in many different regions, for example, comprehensive economic development strategies, as well as other economic plans, are really foundational pieces for the CERF program and should be considered and taken into account as regions organize around the CERF. Want to emphasize, of course, that these economic plans are not obviously not the end all and be all of the planning process. There's still a ton of work that needs to be done when we move into the planning phase of the CERF and the implementation phase. A ton of work to be done in our regional collaborative to figure out what priorities we want to advance, but these regional and sub-regional economic plans are really important foundational pieces and really good starting points for us as we begin to organize around the CERF. So in our Sacramento region, we have several of these, and what you're seeing now on the slide in front of you are some examples. So we have our 6-county prosperity strategy, which is the federally recognized comprehensive economic development strategy for the 6-county region. But we've also got Envision Tahoe, which is the prosperity strategy for the Tahoe region. We also have the Yuba Sutter prosperity strategy, which is the economic development strategy for the Yuba Sutter Economic Development District. And as well, we also have the Sierra Comprehensive Economic Development Strategy, which is the strategy for the Sierra Economic Development District. And these are just some examples. And as I said, these pieces really foundational to and really important starting point as our region gets organized around the CERF. Next slide, please. In addition to these regional and sub-regional economic plans, and in relation to that, in our region, we've also been able to identify several high growth sectors. As both Evan and Ish noted, one of the program pillars of the CERF is really creating those accessible and high quality jobs in sustainable industries and using that as a pathway to economic development. So having identified and having awareness of these high growth sectors in our region, again, also a very important foundational starting piece for us as we get organized and prepare ourselves for the CERF. So some of these are listed here. You have health and life sciences, advanced manufacturing and mobility, food and agriculture, distribution and e-commerce, forestry and watershed management, and tourism. And again, these are all things that, because of all that work that our region and the sub-regions have put into those economic development plans, we've been able to sort of identify these, and again, good starting points, good guideposts for us as we get started on this process. Next slide, please. Okay, so the next thing I want to talk about is, so I mentioned a couple of assets that we have in our region. I want to move on to talking about, so as Evan and Ish mentioned, one of the objectives of one of the outcomes of the planning phase of the CERF is really building the regional collaborative that will undertake that planning phase and come up with an economic development plan that is responsive to the CERF program pillars. So we've started thinking about what it might look like to build that collaborative out. The slide you're seeing in front of you now is really just a visual of kind of early brainstorming we've done around what that what building that collaborative might look like. We want to share it with you all, and we're really interested in hearing folks' thoughts on this. And of course, this is, as I said, just sort of early visual of brainstorming. We're all going to be working together to kind of refine this and finalize this and figure out what this looks like in terms of a governance structure later on. So I'll turn your attention to sort of the three big squares in the middle. So the idea of this structure that you're seeing in front of you is that our region would convene around several different roundtables. So you would have some roundtables that are sector-based. So for example, food and ag, advanced mobility, health and life sciences. You would also have roundtables that are strategy-based, so not necessarily tied to a certain sector, but strategies that cut across all the sectors. For example, creating an environment that is business-friendly, investing in broadband infrastructure, and closing the digital divide. And then you would also have roundtables that are SEDS-based. So again, these are those regional and sub-regional economic plans. So you would also convene roundtables around those different plans that have already been done and already exist. And the folks who would be filling up those different roundtables, if you turn your attention to sort of the longer rectangle at the bottom, the idea is that each of these roundtables would include stakeholders and community members from all these different groups. So workforce partners, major employers, labor, climate justice advocates, jurisdictions, community-based organizations, direct community representation, small businesses, and our tribes. So you have all those folks feeding into those different roundtables, and then the next level, so and among those different roundtables, maybe one or two folks from each roundtable would make up a sort of core steering committee that helps drive and lead that planning phase process. And then of course at the top you've got the state who are managing, administering this program. So again, sort of early brainstorming around what it might look like to start building this collaborative, interested in hearing from folks and their thoughts on this, and looking forward to continuing to refine this with all of you as we move forward in our, move forward in the CERF process. Next slide, please. And finally, the last thing I want to touch on, so as was mentioned, I think in the chat and as mentioned by Ish, we're now in the phase of preparing an application for the planning phase. And one of the things we've done under that is sort of identify, what are the kind of big buckets of activity that will be undertaken during the planning phase. So we make sure that we account for that as we put together application. And those big buckets, those 4 big buckets are what you're seeing in front of you. So for example, research, a lot of research activity around summarizing current economic and community conditions, defining clean jobs, identifying economic growth opportunities. Second bucket would be around backbone support and governance. So setting planning tables, forming and managing inclusive regional governance structures that support decision-making. A third bucket would be a very important piece, the community engagement piece. This can be through surveys, focus groups, interviews, forums, events, engage research, and really any other effective mechanisms for engaging with a diverse array of community members. And finally, the fourth bucket, the capacity building and technical assistance piece. So we want to be able to increase capacity for community-based organizations to participate and assist regional entities in developing business plans to be able to elevate applications when we get to that implementation phase of the CERF. And with that, I am going to turn it back over to Evan, who's going to be leading and moderating our panel.
Great, thank you so much, Ish and Isa. Great presentations, and happy to pause there and answer questions that people have. So if anybody has a question, please go ahead and put it in the chat, or feel free to raise your hand. Isa, I appreciate kind of going through what some of these tasks that we'll be facing might look like in the planning phase. I also want to really note that's something that we're building together as a region. So we're kind of trying to show you visually what those activities could include and what that collaborative is going to look like. But we also have lots of space to create that together. And I see in the chat, yes, we will share this recording, and we'll share the slides as well. How will homeless folks be included in this planning process? That's a great question, and I think as we move into the planning phase, that'll be part of that community outreach and engagement strategy. So really thinking about how are those who are impacted by economic decisions able to weigh in. Would each of the organizations apply to Valley Vision to participate? So in terms of what types of, there's kind of two different elements to this. There's what projects will go forward, and there's how people might participate in the collaborative. When we think about which projects might move forward when we go into the implementation phase, we will have created within the governance structure a decision-making body to make those types of decisions. So none of those decisions would be made by Valley Vision alone as the regional organizer. Rather, Valley Vision would help facilitate the group in being able to make those decisions. In terms of participating in the collaborative, we really want to create an open opportunity for people to participate and create opportunity to build capacity for people to participate. So one thing we're going to do at the end of this session is gauge from you all individually what's your interest in participating in this collaborative. And so from that idea of how many people are interested, what does that look like, we'll start to craft a way to engage. But I think there's going to be different levels of potential engagement, all the way from participating in input sessions to actively co-designing and being financially supported to be able to participate in that collaborative. So there's quite a range. And then also, when you think about the different functions that we'll be fulfilling, like community outreach, and we talked about research, community outreach, and other things. There's also roles for those who are in the collaborative and those who are doing that work now to be able to do that work also as part of CERF. There's an important opportunity. I see this comment talking about climate resilience. So knowing that CERF is really focused on low carbon, transition to a low carbon economy, I think that climate resilience intersection is going to be really important. So as we move into the planning phase, that will be an important lens that we think about. All right. Let's see. I've got just a couple more questions, then we're going to move on to the panel. How can rural stakeholders from outside the Sacramento urban region be equally involved? This is absolutely a regional effort. This is not a Metro Sacramento driven effort. And so as we think about engagement, there's going to be a geographic component to that. So as Isa talked a little bit about some of the roundtables that might be geographic based that will then lead into the core decision-making body, whatever that looks like. But considerations will be made across every county, across every geographic region to make sure that we have representation across the really very diverse types of communities that we have. The funding priorities, the question is, have the funding priorities and programs for the Sacramento been established? No, they have not. So we do have a foundation in our existing economic plans, and we have some research to back up where we know there are kind of high growth tradable clusters. And so we know some things about our economy. We know what some of our needs are. We know where some of our opportunities are. But in terms of what the priorities are for the CERF program, that has not been determined. And they'll also differentiate by different subregions as well. So we'll get into that a little bit in the panel. So I'm going to stop there with the questions. Isa and Ish, thank you so much for those presentations. If there's more questions, then please go ahead and keep putting them in the chat. And even if we don't get to them during the session, we can follow up with you. And now I'm really excited to turn to our panel. And so we brought together folks who represent different communities throughout our entire region, so that we can start to think about what does this look like for different communities, and how are we thinking about what the opportunities are. So I'm going to get into the panel discussion. I'm going to ask each panelist to introduce yourself as we get into the first question. But the first question that I have for our panelists are, what are you excited about when you think about the CERF program, and where do you see the opportunities for your communities? So I'm going to start with Pat Fonkushida from the Sac Asian Chamber. So Pat, please jump on, introduce yourself. I think you'll be spotlighted here, and tell us about what are your thoughts about where you see the opportunities for CERF.
Well, thank you, Evan, and really appreciate the opportunity to have that discussion today. I am Pat Fonkushida, and I am President and CEO of the Sacramento and California Asian Pacific Chambers of Commerce, and part of the planning committee with respect to the Prosperity Partnership. And so really appreciate the opportunity to dialogue with you today.
Thanks, Pat. And when you think about CERF, like where do you see the core opportunities for the communities that you work with?
So the Sacramento Asian Pacific Chamber of Commerce has been working for the past 3 years on an effort to build a collaborative that's much more inclusive. And we were successful in building a collaborative called the Sacramento Inclusive Economic Development Collaborative. That's made up of 17 different organizations that span the network of primarily the Sacramento County, but there are some regional nonprofits that are also part of that collaborative. And we see this as a real opportunity to better engage our neighborhoods. We see this as a real opportunity to better engage our urban cores. We see this as a real opportunity to better engage, quite frankly, getting to that equity-centered inclusivity process, a framework by which we could get to that and have that be a sustainable strategy as we move forward.
Great, thanks, Pat. That's super helpful. I'm going to open it up for our next panelist. So, like I said, we have folks here from all different parts of our region, including Heidi Hill-Drum from the Tahoe Prosperity Center, really thinking about what does this look like in the Tahoe economy, and what kind of opportunities do you see in your region. So, Heidi, I'll turn that question to you and ask you, what are you excited about and what opportunities do you see?
Thanks again, Evan, and thanks for coordinating. I know it's a lot of work on your staff to put something like this together, and we really appreciate your support and facilitation. So for those who don't know me, I'm Heidi Drum, and I'm the CEO of the Tahoe Prosperity Center. We're the regional community and economic development organization up in Lake Tahoe. And we regularly work with our partners like Valley Vision in Sacramento, as well as Sierra Business Council up in Truckee on all of the things that matter to our region, because we all know that we cross those borders every day. I was in Sacramento yesterday for doctor's appointments, and today I'm back in Tahoe. So my gas money yesterday went to Sacramento. So anyway, I think what we're really excited about here in Lake Tahoe is that we're just about to finish our economic resiliency strategy called Envision Tahoe. And this work has already been informed for the past year by local resident input, businesses, government, environmental, and community stakeholder folks. And so it's been bound in socioeconomic data and research. So we're sort of at a point where we're just ready to implement all of these great action plans and tactical work plans to help our regional economy become more resilient. And the reason that's important is we used to be 42% dependent on tourism, and we've gone to 62% dependent on tourism. And then the pandemic happened, and then the Caldor fire happened, and our tourism industry shut down overnight. And so we have to be thinking longer term about resilient strategies. So we're really looking forward to the CERF program sort of providing us the resources to implement our Envision Tahoe effort, because it's been so collaborative and we're really ready to hit the ground running. So thanks for the opportunity to share.
Thanks so much, Heidi. And next, I want to turn to Kim Williams on our panel. Kim Williams is the long-term manager of the SAC Building Healthy Communities. Kim, I know you've worked on this collective impact project for a long time, working with a lot of our community-based organizations throughout Sacramento. I would love to hear from you. When you think about your communities, where do you see opportunities as it relates to CERF, and what makes you excited about this program?
Yeah, thank you. Thank you for having me on the panel with you all. When I first heard about this project, I was extremely interested. The rare opportunity to have influx of dollars coming in like this from the state to around economic development is amazing. And how our communities were so negatively impacted by the pandemic and what it meant for the loss of jobs and industries, businesses, and unfortunately the loss of life as well. So we've seen so much, so many of our families and our communities that have been struggling. And so I think for me, and some of the folks that I've been talking to that are working with us in building healthy communities has really been like, how can this opportunity benefit those communities that are most in need, and that there's a strong equity lens on this work so that we have the chance to really focus on those communities that are often left out, and that we can actually take this opportunity. And I think this is what excites me. It's like, this is a real opportunity, if we do this right, to really begin to invest in those communities and create opportunities that really level the playing field for communities that are most often left out. And, you know, I speak to Sacramento because that's where I am, but even when I think about the region and understanding this is a very large region that we have to cover, but I'm sure that there's no community or city anywhere that's a part of this in our region that doesn't have communities that have been disinvested historically, who have some real strong needs. And let's really look at how we can level the playing field, build up those communities, have a strong, I mean, I keep saying that I think equity is going to be key in this work, because it's, again, this is an opportunity that, you know, we don't know when the state's going to gift us these kinds of opportunities again, and we have to really take advantage of it so then we can build on it as we move forward.
Great, thank you so much for that, Kim. Next, we're going to go to a different area of our region, and I'd like to introduce Lan Hadamia from the Hadamia Group to talk about your experiences in the Yuba Sutter Calusa region. You've been doing a lot of work throughout there and throughout the state throughout your career. So Lan, would love to hear from you, a little introduction and what excites you about this program.
Evan, thank you so much for the invitation to join you today. I am the president and CEO of the Hadamia Group, but I previously served as Secretary of Technology, Trade, and Commerce for California, where I helped assist all counties throughout the state. But I'm also a third-generation family farmer from Yuba County. And so much of my more recent time has been spent assisting the counties in that area. I am the principal economic advisor to the Yuba Water Agency, to the city of Wheatland. We recently are in the midst of completing a SACOG study to look at transportation flows between Yuba and Sutter counties. And I've also worked very closely with the tribal nations in both Yuba, Sutter, and Calusa counties, as well as Yolo counties over the last number of years. So I'm glad to follow Kim's comments about equity, and why am I most excited about this CERF program. I think it's the first time, if I had these funds when I was Secretary of Commerce for the state of California, I would have been excited to help invest in areas that have been underrepresented and certainly neglected over the past years. And many of the rural and smaller counties fit under that, but also the communities within those counties have also been neglected. I'm talking about BIPOC farmers. I'm talking about tribal nations. I'm talking about other communities throughout our region that have been neglected for far too long. And so I think CERF allows us to bring together a lot of the great work that we're focused on. But more importantly, for rural communities, one of the cornerstones of the SEDS that Isa mentioned briefly before is food and agriculture. And there are a lot of opportunities to build upon a growth sector, not only in the traditional way, but for example, more recently, I'm assisting in the development of a feasibility study for a Yolo food hub, also assisting the folks in Yuba County looking at a food hub as well too. But more importantly, there's a connection to the development of advanced manufacturing jobs into the future. Recently, I just helped author and complete a feasibility study for what's now called the Planet California, which is an innovation center that we hope to focus in the Sacramento region that will be an innovation, creation, research, and technology site to develop new types of jobs. So job training is also important throughout CERF. One last mention that I like to highlight is that economic development is also dependent upon infrastructure development. And part of the problems that we face in many of the counties in this region are a lack of water, wastewater treatment, and other opportunities. And in order to build economic diversity, we also have to have the infrastructure to supply that. So I'm excited about working with all of the panelists that are here today, but also across this region to determine what's the best plan ahead. Thanks, Evan.
Thank you so much, Lan. And finally, last but not least, I want to bring Cecilia Flores from SAC Act onto the panel. Cecilia, I know that SAC Act has been engaged deeply in faith communities and also in community organizing across Sacramento. I'm really interested in hearing from you, your introduction, but and as well, what excites you about the program? Where do you see opportunities for your communities?
Hi, thanks for having me. My name is Cecilia Flores. Pronouns are she, her, and hers, and I am a community organizer with Sacramento Act. For those who aren't familiar with our work, we work mostly within Sacramento County in the city of Sacramento with over 56 congregations, community groups, and things like that, mostly in faith-based settings. Something that I find really exciting about CERF, especially our work in the communities, faith-based communities are often a hub for where people go when they've fallen upon hard times, when they need assistance, right? We have a lot of nonprofits that operate out of houses of faith. And what the pandemic did in many ways was kind of eliminate that safety net, right? There where people were used to going to the church, maybe because they needed food or maybe because they needed rental assistance or what have you. A lot of our houses, our congregations were shut down, really. They lost volunteers, they lost donations, they lost so many things. And I think what that really revealed to us was, we can't depend, right, on this type of help, that people should really be able to have access to sustainable lifestyles. And we know that for many, many years prior to the pandemic, that so many communities that we work with are suffering and are having such a hard time. And the pandemic, I think, brought that to the forefront. And now that it wasn't only all of these communities that were historically, but like other people were experiencing hardship in ways they never had before. So it was almost like a coming together of a different sense of empathy that perhaps did not exist. And I think, really looking at now as an opportunity through this type of funding to say, how can we actually impact these low-income communities of color that have historically, suffered from economic hardship, and how can we really uplift them and really highlight those stories so that they're continuing to be centered in this process? I mean, that's something that is exciting for us. And the fact that it's happening, there's so many questions about how, but because it's, we're kind of starting from the ground up, it's like, well, we don't know the how, but because we're here together, we have the ability to inform that how. So that's something that's exciting.
Good, thank you so much. And I think that's a great segue into our next question, because I think what the CERF program is enabling for us is to do things differently than how we've done it in the past. And it's also, helping provide resources and expectations and accountability and the opportunity to really come about this idea of economic growth in a different way, in a very equity-centered way, in a very inclusive way. And I think we also have to have our eyes wide open about that's going to be hard and challenging. So that's kind of where I wanted to go next, is to have a conversation with you all about what do you see as some of the challenges that we face, and any thoughts you have about how we might successfully navigate those challenges. And we can kind of open up for a discussion among the panel. So anybody who would like to, please jump in.
Well, Evan, one of the things I'd like to say is if you look across these squares and we see the variety of what folks are representing just on this panel, and you look at the 98 participants plus that are below us, each of us bring our own set of community, right? And what we are laser-like focused on and what we think are priorities. But what's really interesting and what gives us the opportunity under the CERF funding umbrella is the linkages. So if Lon's talking about ag, and Lon's talking about an UBA, an innovation center focused on ag, and he's talking about how do we bring communities of color to the table around an ag opportunity, and Heidi's talking about a better opportunity to engage, right, so that they diversify their economy beyond tourism, and what that looks like, and how they've already engaged, and how can we link and do that, right? And Cecilia's talking about her faith-based organizations and how they're struggling. And Kim's talking about her communities and how we're struggling, right? It's those linkages, I think, that are really going to be key in order to be able to do this the right way, right? And it's also going to be based on data and research, because we don't know what we don't know. And part of what we've been doing with the Prosperity Partnership is identifying obviously the economic opportunities, but the implementation on where those jobs get created and the implementation on how those jobs get created and the implementation on how we identify folks in our communities that are going to be ready for those high-paying jobs are going to be critical. And so from my vantage point and just in my small world, right, I think our biggest opportunity, and I will submit to all of you, our biggest opportunities in supply chain. Our biggest opportunity is identifying those organizations and those companies that are going to be supplying all of that, all of the products and services and everything for climate resiliency, for food and ag, for all the things that we're talking about. And then identifying within our communities where those assets and gaps exist, and then providing the type of technical assistance and job training that's going to be needed to get our folks ready to go. And that's the heavy lift, but it's the linkages that we're going to have to do in order to streamline this thing in such a way that all of identifying where the assets and gaps are in each of our communities, and then bringing the folks that are qualified to the table, and where those folks that need the technical assistance and job training have pathways for those folks too. And the other thing I will say, and this is really important, and this goes to the heart of equity, we need a head of the line strategy. And I'll say this around because we have a $1 million contract with cannabis. I'm just going to tell you guys, I'm in the cannabis business now. Thought I never would be, but I am. And what the cannabis entity taught us is they said, for those most impacted by the war on drugs, they deserve to be at the head of the line when it comes to licensing and opportunities and new business start and all of the things that the new cannabis industry offered, right? So I would say that as we start to do this work, part of what I would advocate for is what is our head of the line strategy, particularly for our communities of color and outlying rural communities, all the folks that have been disadvantaged. What is our strategy for those folks to get to the head of the line first?
Thank you, Pat. Kim, I see you coming off mute. What are your thoughts about challenges that we're facing?
Yeah, so for me, when I look at a lot of the challenges that this initiative is going to have, it's going to be really, how are we going to make sure that we are getting the folks at the table that need to be at the table. I think there's, the outreach and the education that has to be done in the community. Traditionally, when large things like this come into our areas, there's certain organizations that are there, they know about it, they're primed and they're ready to go. But you have a lot of organizations that are doing some amazing work, boots on the ground work, and have their ear to the ground and could really lead and help us build, but they don't often get invited to the table. They don't even know about the table. So I think we're going to have to really do some major work around outreach and education on folks and making sure those things are put in place. I think the other challenges is looking at, like Pat said, understanding, the industries that are here, that are coming here, where the available jobs and things like that are, is going to be very important. And then also to look at, what's needed and then what's new and what's innovative too. What are some of these things that we need to bring into the sectors that maybe aren't here yet or are needed to come in, and how do we then build workforce development and training around those initiatives? I think it's going to be really important, because making sure that our people are, we don't want to continue to see people moving from outside of our areas to come in and get the good jobs. We want to make sure that people who live in Sacramento or live in Tahoe or live in some of the other cities in these regions, that they get the good jobs. And but we have to do our part to make sure that they're ready for that. And that takes work. It takes commitment. It takes resources to do that. And it also takes, really reaching deep into our communities to encourage those people. What we're doing in our educational systems, how are our young people in schools being trained? What are the subject matters that are there now? What do we need to include? What do we need to change? There's, when I think of a lot of the industries and some of the work that we've seen happen, things around, there's mental health, but mental health crosses everything, even into the workforce areas. Are there opportunities there for us to improve our workforce development in those areas? Technology, of course, science and research, and how are we even at the levels now where kids are in, you know, middle school and high school, in college and junior college, are we getting them ready to go so that they can graduate from college and they want to stay in Sacramento and work because there's opportunities there. So I think for us, we really have to begin to look at, you know, doing the deep needed work we need to do to reach the folks we need to reach, and put those programs in place and put those training opportunities and educational opportunities in place now so that we can be ready.
Hi, just to build on what Kim is talking about, like, yes, I'm the idea of making sure that the people who are most deeply impacted and who would really benefit the most from something like this are not only reached, but I think also considering in program design and implementation what actual accessibility looks like for people on the ground. You know, it's one thing, you know, to let them know about a program, and then it's a whole nother thing when they want to participate in a program and realize it's on this side of town and I don't have a car, or I don't have child, right? So it's not just, it's a great program maybe, but if they can't actually access it, then that's also a problem, right? So equity, not only in the outreach, but also in how we are carrying out these programs in whatever way they might look, so that people can actually participate and benefit, I think is so important as well. And it's like what Kim is saying, that's the hard work, right? Like, I might have a great workforce development program, but if the person that really wants to participate in it doesn't have the childcare or the transportation or what different other things that they would need to actually participate, then how are we actually helping them overcome those obstacles? Because it's not just, you know, the single vision of having them in this program. And I think we have to keep looking at those things and really collaborating across the board, right? So that we're able to overcome those obstacles. And, you know, that's a concern for me, because I think if we're not able to do that, then we've really missed the mark with what this could be.
Evan, if I could follow on to what Cecilia and Kim and Pat have just said, I think one of the interesting things about our region is it is certainly a microcosm of California as a whole. We have diverse communities across this region, both geographically, but ethnically, but urban versus rural. So the challenge will be is how do we collectively come up with an idea that we can all accept? That's really the biggest challenge. But I think it's also the biggest opportunity, because as we take a look at workforce development, I think we have to shoot high. We have to shoot high for what's the future growth sectors. We've outlined that, Isa outlined that for us. But I think there are, you know, we talk about food and agriculture. People think, oh, that's a traditional area, but there are many different opportunities there that we haven't taken advantage of. We're the epicenter of not only the growth of food, but how does that relate to health? How does it relate to the environment? How does it relate to global warming? How does it relate to energy consumption and water consumption in the future? So there are a lot of technology-related opportunities that can emerge from this challenge. And who better suited to bring answers to that than the diverse communities in which we all represent? We have some of the smartest people in this region as well too. So we should be able to come up with some good collective ideas that can be implemented in a very productive way.
That's great, thank you. And I think we've certainly laid out the complexities of not just our economy, but our communities, and and particularly around the equity issues when we're really thinking about how do we create systems and programs that benefit all and that are accessible for people. I think that, especially knowing that we're running a lot of time, I want to bring us back to the positive side and end with maybe a lightning round question that would be a fill in the blank. So if this program is successful, that would actually, I'll just say, what does success look like for you? So if we're doing what we need to do, what would success look like? And I'll start with Heidi on that.
Thanks, Evan. It's interesting, Lon, you know, food and ag, not so much up here in Tahoe, right? So our regional goals and success are going to be different. I mean, I try every year to grow tomatoes, and every year we get to freeze in June and they die, and it's sad. But you know, and much like everybody else has said, we have some inclusive tables, but I don't actually think we've really gotten to the point of our Latino and Latina community in particular feeling like they belong. And so I'm learning more about equity and inclusion because I'm a white woman and I can't represent that community, but I want to make sure that for us, success looks like all of our Spanish community members in Tahoe, which it's very significant that they belong at the table, feel like they belong, and they're involved in the effort. And we've done a much better job of that through our Envision Tahoe work, but we still have further to go. And for us, again, the bottom line is really, we're drifting into this future where Tahoe is only defined as a visitor destination and not as a place to live, work, raise a family, build a business, and sustain a community. So that is what success looks like for us. Tahoe can be a place where you can do all of those things. Thanks.
Thanks, Heidi. How about others?
I think when I think about what success looks like, it's that we have within the entire region of this project is that it's that we see economic growth for all of our communities that's equitable and inclusive, that we've seen new and innovative workforce development happening, and that that we have diverse people who are at our tables who have co-created this so that it works for everybody and nobody gets left out.
Thanks, Kim. Other panelists want to jump in? Pat, any thoughts?
Well, I think that the CERF is a very teachable moment for our region and for our communities. And I do feel that expanding on the CERF in terms of creating the infrastructure that Kim's described, I don't think it's enough that we set the table. I don't think it's enough that we're equity centered and we have an inclusive process. I think it's the ability of the implementation that's going to define who we are and how we do this. And so I'm very interested. The success for me looks like how we implement the pathways that we create that are sustainable to continue that ongoing implementation. And then also, I think it's really going to be important. This isn't a little bit of money. This is a lot of money initially, but it is a little bit of money if we think about the ongoing need for us to really create a different dynamic here, right? And so for me, I think the success would look like how we start to braid all of the various funding that's coming in from the feds and the state and everything that's occurring at the federal level that really talks about, equity and inclusion. I do think that there's a moment in time now for us to be able to start to braid additional funding into all of this. So for me, it's really about implementation and creating the infrastructure for longer term sustainability around this work.
Thank you, Pat. And Cecilia, how about you?
Yeah, I think I co-sign everything that's been said by all the other panelists so far. I think success for me, and I think for our organization, is like something that's like continuously being measured, right? Like there won't be a one defining moment where it's like, we've done it, right? But I think looking at those milestones and being able to look back and say, this table is so diverse and we have the most impacted communities driving this work. We're implementing, and the feedback we're getting now is showing us that we are doing well. And then even like 5 years from now, what does that look like? What have we created? What can we step back and look at and say, this is the result of our hard work over the past 5 years? And it's so abstract because I think we're creating something that is like a dream in some senses, right? Like we're aiming high and we're dreaming big. And it's almost like I want success to be so undefinable because it's just beyond my conception and what I would want for our communities. I'm a dreamer.
That's fantastic. And Lon, how about you?
Yeah, I could not agree more with what everybody has already said. And I agree with Cecilia, we have to shoot high. What we have to also shoot for is that policy making in the long term is fully ingrained with inclusion and equity. That's something that we don't currently have in California. We talk about it, but policies don't exist that enable us to do that. I mean, I was the first Asian Pacific Islander cabinet member in the history of California, and that was only a short time ago. And so thank you, Evan, for bringing this panel together. But realistically, this is not generally what the region is represented by. So in the future, I'm hoping all panels look like this, and that this CERF program enables us to move it a step forward in terms of policy changes. I mean, that's really the key to success for us as we move forward.
All right. Well, I want to thank all of you so much. This has been a fantastic panel. I think you all have painted the picture of what this opportunity can be for our region and the real need to focus on our impacted communities, to listen to our impacted communities, and to put that in the center. And I'm, I mentioned at the onset of this meeting, I'm coming in with a lot of excitement about CERF, but you all have only really increased the level of excitement that I feel. So thank you so much. I really appreciate you being here and your time. I know that there's been a lot of comments and some questions coming through in the chat, and we are not going to have time to get to those because I really do want to make sure we have time for you all to talk with one another. So if there are questions that we can follow up with, we will do that. For now, I'm going to turn it over to Isa, I think, to give us some instructions about going into some breakout rooms.
Thanks, Evan. And Jen, if we could pull up that final slide with the breakout room questions, just so folks get an idea of what we'll be talking about in the breakout rooms, although we'll also have those in the chat for you to reference. So this next part of our session, we're going to be breaking out into different breakout rooms, and it'll really just be a forum for folks to talk about what are you excited about with the CERF, what are some of your concerns. In terms of logistics, please bear with us. It's going to take a couple of minutes to get us all organized. So what's going to happen is that everybody is going to be randomly assigned to one breakout room. If you are from the Tahoe region, there is going to be a separate room where you all will be chatting with Heidi. So if you are from the Tahoe region, whatever room you end up in, please move over to breakout room 1. That will be our room with all our Tahoe folks. Hey, Heidi. Yeah.
Truckee and Tahoe, because we have Sierra
Yes,
Business.
thank you. Yes, thank you so much for clarifying that. Yes, so if you are from the Tahoe region or Truckee, whatever room you randomly end up in, please, you'll see sort of at the bottom of your Zoom screen, there's like a button with, I think, you should see like a breakout rooms button, I believe. And if you click that, you should be able to navigate over into breakout room 1. Again, for our Tahoe region and Truckee folks, whatever room you end up with, make your way to breakout room 1. If you are having some trouble navigating that, just come back to the main room, and Jen, who is here and helping us out, will help navigate you to the right room. If you are not from the Tahoe region or Truckee area, just whatever room you end up in, that's your room, and each room will have a facilitator to walk us through the questions. All right, so you should start to see those prompts again. Any questions or any confusion, go ahead, come back to the main room, and Jen will help you out to find your spot.
I hope you all had really great conversations and were able to talk through some of the opportunities, some of the challenges, and some of the thoughts about how do we support people's capacity to be able to participate in the process, because that's a really important component. If we could, I know we're just wrapping up. We have one more slide that I want to share before we adjourn the meeting, because I want to talk about next steps and talk about creating this regional application for CERF. So I want to put out there that we are advancing a regional application. It is an application for a planning process, and so there's a bit of the right spot to hit as we're doing this application, that we don't need to bake everything, because we're going to have a lot of the capacity to be able to do that throughout the planning process. But the state is asking for a robust set of responses relating to how we're building our collaborative and what our core concept is. And so between now and July 25th, when that application is due, we're going to be doing outreach and workshops. So we're really looking at our different, if you think about that visual of sector-based strategies and geography-based strategies and really zeroing in on community engagement and outreach. We'll be doing a piece of that over the next couple months. We'll be working on the application development, using input that we get from people and kind of building support in that way. And we'll start to develop this the beginning of our collaborative. And I just really want to note that we're at building block 1, and we're really just starting to do this together. This isn't a matter of, Valley Vision has already done the work. Now we're looking for people to check the boxes. This is something we're trying to build together as a region, starting really right now. And so we're anticipating doing a every other week application planning meeting coming up in June, all the way through until, yes, biweekly is every other week, all the way through until the end of July. So that's one thing that we have in mind, to really create this co-ownership, because that's really our goal. This is a regional strategy, and we intend to be the container of that regional strategy as we're thinking about the governance and facilitating the processes that we need to. So with that in mind, what you're looking at in front of you is this QR code, and then you can see the link underneath, and maybe somebody from the Valley Vision team could drop that link into the chat as well. It's a really quick, simple survey that indicates your interest in participating in the application process. And I want to note that your decision to participate in the application process or not does not preclude your participation in the collaborative when we reach the planning phase. So it's not an all or nothing. It's really an invitation to you all to see who would like to be most engaged as we're thinking about this really early program design and really early design around our planning processes. And then we'll include you, and we'll be in touch. In the meantime, for all of those that would like to monitor what we're doing but don't want to dive in quite that deeply, we're going to be really transparent about all of our materials. We're going to have a landing spot on our website where we're keeping minutes and notes. We're going to be putting some surveys out as we go through the process to get feedback from a wider group of people. So as we're enacting this process, we're really trying to have an open invitation, very transparent forms of communication, and bring everybody along. So really thank you for taking the time to be with us today, and really looking forward to all of us working on this together and creating this regional vision for economic growth and equity, and then really, getting it done, really enacting some of those strategies and focusing on the implementation and really advancing some of these big goals that we have as a region. So thank you so much for being here, and we will continue to be in communication.